What's going on, football fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with a Monday Night Football preview for tonight's two-game slate. A little bit different because we have the two games to choose from. So, going to talk about how to handle some of those large field GPPs, a few of the different strategies you can use to put together your lineups to get different. Make sure you're not going to duplicate yourself a million different times, and hopefully find yourself towards the top of some of those GPPs. Afterwards, we'll talk about some of the prop situations over there on Underdog and Prize Picks and a few props that you might want to get some exposure to for some of your personal exposure. So a lot to get into here. Let's go ahead and start it off with our DFS preview for this two-game slate. These two gamers can be a little bit daunting at first, but if you look at them like two mini showdown slates, I think you can go out there and build lineups pretty easily. So when I talk about thinking about it like a showdown slate, what I mean is take a look at each of the game environments, kind of figure out a few different ways that you could see each of those matchups going, and then when you're building your lineups, mix and match some of those scripts. So just to give you an idea, right, this Titans-Dolphins game has a massive spread. It's like a 2-touchdown spread. I'm heading into lock there. A lot of people would assume that the Dolphins, right, are going to be the team you want to target there, but there's a few different ways they could get to the optimal, right? It could be through a Tua in the passing, right? It could be Tyreek Hill and Jalen going out there and getting a bunch of yards. It could also be A-Chain and Mostert going out there scoring 2-3 touchdowns themselves. So there's a few different ways you could consider that game going, and on the flip side, you've got this Giants-Packers game that has a whole lot of outcomes you could consider too. So if you're on the Packers side, there's no Aaron Jones, so maybe they're a little bit more pass heavy, or of course, you've got the chalk A.J. Dillon, who's going to be relatively high owned. It could also break the slate as a rusher. So within each game, right, there are little micro scripts that you can go after. Even with that Tua versus Tennessee matchup, maybe you think Will Levis puts up a pretty good fight tonight. You know, you could assume that they do it through a passing attack, right? Maybe you think Derrick Henry just takes over the game. Now, that would be a little bit more of a fringe outcome, but still, right, then you would rely on that Titans rushing attack. Just having scripts in mind for how you think the slate could play out really makes it easy to build lineups, right? So let's go ahead and give you an example here. So in this first game, right, I really like the rushing side for the Dolphins. So if we go over here to our running back projections, you'll see that Devin A-Chain is my one core play at this position right now. Now, these projections, of course, are what I post over there on my Patreon page. By the time we get to lock, I'll probably have at least 2 core plays for every single position. But as of right now, I really like attacking A-Chain, and he's getting some ownership. We're going to have to leave some salary on the table. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But as long as you're mixing in a wide receiver, maybe it's a tight end down here that's essentially unowned, you can get away with playing an A-Chain. I mean, even a Tyreek Hill, right? Let's assume you're taking the more chalky approach with this Miami versus Tennessee game. You can still take a Tyreek Hill. You just have to get different in one of your other spots. I think the important part here is building lineups for a script, though. You know, a lot of people out there for main slate stuff, you know, they'll use mini stacks. They'll take their quarterback, you know, maybe have a buyback out there as well on top of just a correlation pairing with your quarterback. But on a slate like this, when you only have 2 games to choose from, it is a lot more important than what you have for a main slate, right? When we have 13 games to choose from, you're going to have individual pieces of games that go off, right? Even in lower scoring matchups, you might have a guy that goes out there, scores a touchdown, has 10 catches, and that's his path to the optimal lineup. Well, with only 2 games to choose from, you don't have nearly as many of those individual outcomes, right? And if one game ends up going out there and being like a 55 point total, and the other game's like a 35 point total, well, your optimal lineup might have like 8 guys, right, out of that one game and just like 1 or 2 out of the other. That's why on a 2-game slate like this, you have to consider the game scripts, right? So if you think that this game against the Tennessee Titans, and if you're a little bit more rushing heavy about it, there might only be 1-2 players that get there, right? Let's assume that maybe A-Chain or Mostert goes out there and is doing his thing, scoring 2-3 touchdowns. Well, that means there's going to be less plays overall in the game, right? We have Derrick Henry on the other side, who's also going to get plenty of touches. Well, this could be a low-paced game, I should say. There could be less plays run than what you'd see in a lot of other matchups, and maybe it is that Green Bay versus the Packers game that you have to have more of. So by starting to think about the script in one game, right, it starts to kind of shape your strategy for the other game that you're attacking, and vice versa. So in a lineup that I'm using that's a little bit more rushing heavy between the Titans and the Dolphins out there, maybe on the other side, I'm taking a Jordan Love stack, right? Like I mentioned before, I think a lot of people are going to play an A.J. Dillon tonight, but perhaps they're a little bit more passing heavy, right? He's only $6,000, right? He's the best in terms of points per per dollar at the quarterback position. And without a Christian Watson, you have real easy to target wide receivers. I mean, Dobbs, Jaden Reed are more than cheap enough. You can see I absolutely love Jaden Reed because of his down the field threat on that sort of team tonight. But as you start to think about the scripts that you're looking for, it makes it easy to put lineups together, right? My lineups with an A-chain at running back, I might even still use a Tyreek Hill at wide receiver. I'm going to be able to afford those players because I have a Jordan Love stack to go along with it, right? Maybe in terms of my buybacks, we could even take a Saquon, right? He's going to be chalky, but as long as we're not taking Tyreek Hill, we can be able to afford that in terms of salary and over there from the ownership angle. It starts to make a lot of your decisions for you. So my recommendation tonight would be, first off, to be thinking about scripts when you're putting together your lineups. And then on top of that, you've got to get different, right? So I mentioned before about potentially leaving salary on the table. My personal salary cap is going to be right around $49,000. So I'm going to be leaving plenty of salary on the table. That means at wide receiver, I'm going to have to take a few punts. Nick Westbrook-Akina would probably be my favorite as of right now, but you can make an argument for pretty much anyone down here. I mean, the Giants wide receivers are really hard to choose from, but there's a ton that are cheap and essentially unowned on the slate. Down here, you have a bunch of guys in the sub 5% range. Chris Moore, right, he'll get time out there for the Titans. He's a down the field wide receiver. Treylon Burks, if he's completely healthy, right, he's always, viable to go out there and get you a big play. It's these kind of players that'll get you different, right? If you leave that salary on the table, maybe it is a whole $1,000, you mix in a Treylon Burks, or God forbid, one of these tight ends that's sub 2% owned, you're just fine in terms of differentiation. In the largest field GPPs, you might run into a few duplicates if you're, spending upwards of, let's say, $48,000, but it's not going to be like you're duplicating yourself with like 20 to 100 other entries. If you're spending all 50 grand, if you're not taking some of these lower owned plays, you're going to see dupe trains tonight of upwards of 1,000 lineups. And in the large field GPPs, that's really all you have to avoid, right? I mean, there's no real bad lineups that you can make on a 2-game slate like this. And frankly, the more different that you can get, the more comfortable that you should feel about your lineups. So that would be how I would attack these large field GPPs. If you're in cash, a smaller field sort of contest, maybe you have to be a little bit less different about it, right? Maybe you spend more of your salary. Maybe you're not as bullish, right, with these like backup tight ends that you have down here at sub 2% ownership. But if you're playing in, a milli maker sort of contest, or for tonight, I think it's like a $250,000 to first sort of contest, you have to be taking chances on these sort of players. So that would be my, thought process for defense, right? Tie that into your script. You think the Dolphins are going to run it out, right? Make this a slower paced game. They're a perfect spot to take at the defense spot. So I wouldn't overthink defense too much. Really where you want to overthink things and try and get different tonight, I would say tight end. Those backup tight ends, they're a perfect spot for differentiation. These real cheap wide receivers always have upside, especially if they can get into the end zone. Running back, maybe not the best spot, right? Like Tajay Spears, you can make an argument for, especially if the Titans are playing from behind. Patrick Taylor without an Aaron Jones, right? You can make an argument there. I mean, maybe even a Jeff Wilson as the third running back. You can make slight arguments for, it just feels like the wide receivers and the tight ends have a much easier path, right, to that optimal. They just got to get into the end zone, right? They've got to take one of their few touches that they're going to get every single game and turn it into a big play. So embrace that volatility. Tell yourself a script before you go out there and build your lineups and cater it around that kind of mindset. All right, and now for some prop exposure. So the first prop we'll take here is going to be Henry over 13.5 rushing attempts. So against the Dolphins, I already mentioned I think you might see a lot of rushing in this game, but you can't forget about King Henry. I know he's coming in a little bit dinged up, but is not on the injury report right now, so I don't have that many concerns about his usage tonight. You'd have to worry about the script, if anything, right? Anytime there's a 14-point spread, you're taking the guy on the team that's not the favorite out there, you're going to feel a little bit nervous about it. But with Will Levis at quarterback, the Titans have ran the ball a ton, and even in negative scripts, you've seen Henry get 15 to 20 rushes. So I wouldn't be as worried about it as I would be on most other teams out there. And the fact that the Dolphins maybe don't have the best rushing defense, I think just only makes them a slightly better play. So this is more a numbers play than anything. I don't love the script out there for the Titans, right, as 14-point underdogs, but at the same time, I know they're not going to completely abandon the run, and 13.5 is a soft soft enough projection for me to take that over. I believe he was minus 125 on Draftkings for the over, so, a slight lean there when it comes to the juice. But over there on FanDuel, he was plus money for the under, and I believe minus 132 for the over there. So a little bit more line value, showing you that they agree that this is a little bit of a soft projection. Next up, we've got two unders on rushing touchdowns, and I'm just going to go ahead and group these together. Both A.J. Dillon and Saquon Barkley, and I like the Dillon prop a lot more than Barkley, right? So just for full transparency, if you only wanted to take a two-man out of these three, I would definitely prefer Dillon over Barkley, but they're both unders on, rushing plus receiving touchdowns. It's a low total game, 36.5 point total between the Packers and the Giants. Both of these players are plus money for an anytime touchdown, and on DraftKings FanDuel, and if you don't know this, we'll make sure we know now, all of those numbers are extremely vigged. They have some of the biggest in-house edges that you have in any props on all of the sportsbook sites. And in fact, most of them won't even let you bet on somebody not to score a touchdown. So for our best comparison, right, we have to take a look at sportsbooks that give you the option, right, to actually bet against players scoring touchdowns. And Pinnacle is one of the sharper books out there. They have their flaws, like all books, of course, but they are one of the few books that offers you a chance to bet against somebody, right, scoring an anytime touchdown. A.J. Dillon is in the minus 140 range not to score, and Saquon Barkley is minus 132 not to score himself. So the low total game, the fact that there's the whole passing offense, right, to get there with those wide receiver and tight ends is why you have slight value on these unders. So like I said, the A.J. Dillon, I slightly prefer over Saquon Barkley. Both are going to be the bell cow back for their teams tonight. It's just that A.J. Dillon, right, has not scored, right, over the last 3-4 games. Even in the same kind of role, has not been able to score a ton of touchdowns. Saquon Barkley, on the other hand, is a superstar, one of the better running backs in the NFL. So I think he has a slightly better chance of going out there, maybe taking a 20-25 yard run for a touchdown. But either way, the sportsbook value, the, market out there with all the different sites is certainly favoring the under on both these props. And just for full transparency, even on like DraftKings and FanDuel, they're both still plus money, right? So it's not like they're minus 110, minus 120 to score. You may have seen players like even an A-Chain, for example, is like minus 110 to score a touchdown tonight. If you take a look at the actual odds, like a site like Pinnacle, for example, he's like minus 125 or minus 120 towards the under. So you got to remember that there's always that in-house edge that those sites will take advantage of players by using. And if they don't have the option to take a no, you should not be using those data points for comparison, right? Or you should know that you're getting, scammed, right, when it comes to those odds, and incorporate that into your analysis. So this three-man here would pay 6x over here on Underdog. I had it as an insured play down there, but no, I would definitely play this as a standard. It was down there as insured because I had an under on Tua pass attempts, and unfortunately that got bumped. So I would stick to this three-man right now, right? Try not to take any bumped props. And take that 6-out payout there in Underdog. All right, and now for our Prize Picks exposure. So 2 props from the last slip, right? So we don't have to spend a ton of time here going through the props, but it's the Saquon under on touchdowns. You can see it includes passing touchdowns, but I don't know how worried I am about him throwing a touchdown tonight. And then Derrick Henry over on rushing attempts. A lot of the other props I've taken, like A.J. Dillon, for example, right, doesn't even have a prop up here. And Tua, I believe, is at 32 or maybe even 31.5 here. Let's see, where's Tua? Yeah, he's at 32 attempts, so a little bit better than what you have on Underdog at least. So if you wanted to take this under, I wouldn't be completely against it, but I got my exposure at 32.5 pass attempts. So if you're playing on Prize Picks, just trying to get a little bit of exposure, probably just take this two-man here. The other issue with going over here in Prize Picks, even if you wanted to take this under, is they only give you a 5x payout, right? On Underdog, they're giving you 6x. On most sports books, you're getting closer to 6.5x odds, right, for 3 50-50 props. So probably just stick to these two, right? It's closer to the true payout. They're both right around minus 130 odds for their given direction. So you'd be getting a similar payout in all the sports books for your two-man parlay too. So I would stick to those two over there in Prize Picks if that's more of your website. But as of right now, a lot more of the value is available on Underdog, and you do get the slightly better payout for those 3-leg cards. Alrighty, boys, that is all I've got for the Monday Night Football preview. Hopefully you guys can go out there, take down a few contests, and cash out on a few of this prop slips as well. Best of luck with all that exposure. Hit that like button on the way out of here. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so you don't miss any of the content in the future. I'm looking forward to this slate tonight. It's one to get different, right? Try and be a little bit bold with those GPP lineups and the kind of slate that in the past I've had a lot of my spike performances on. Now, on a 2-gamer like this, it can go one way or the other real quickly. And if you're correlating, your scripts like I'm going to tonight, when you miss, it's going to be a big old swing and miss. But if you go out there and hit, are the kind of days where I've had, 5-6 figure kind of days. So I'm really looking forward to it. They're some of my favorite slates that we get of the entire year. So best of luck out there, guys. Hopefully we can go out there, find that success, and get right back after it for Thursday Night Football this week.